Hello to all the fans of Peace Bro and Peace Sis. This is Danny Haiphong. Thank you so much for sending me your questions. I am going to answer them the best that I can. I'm going to answer these one or two at a time. And so I appreciate your patience as I get these videos. The first question that I'll be answering is, can the political process that I've undergone be applied to the rest of the American public? And what are some of the challenges in doing so? The biggest part of my own journey as a journalist and as an activist in learning how important it is to defend China is education. Without education, without deep investigation into the true history of China, into how it relates to the larger global struggle for emancipation, for freedom, from oppression, from charting a course of development which can sustain the needs of people as well as enhance their overall standard of living and ensure human, technical, economic, ecological progress. Without that kind of education, I may have well found myself in the anti-China camp in the United States, which seems to be growing by the day because of the Trump administration's attacks, because the corporate media doesn't challenge this, because the Democratic Party also doesn't challenge this. We're really in a situation where if we had in the United States an alternative political system, an alternative political party that represented the masses of people, that represented their needs and their interests here in the United States, it would be very hard to denigrate and to attack China. But we don't have that here in this country. So I think that the best way that people in the United States can learn more about China is by doing their own investigation. And now that is not easy. I think for activists and journalists and scholars, the way that they can increase their knowledge of China is by studying their sources, by attempting to verify them in their own research, by going to China, visiting. China is one of the most globalized countries in the world, so it's always surprising to me when people call China this big secretive society, when China has embraced foreign investment, it has embraced the world economy, it has embraced the idea of global cooperation. Look at what's happened during the pandemic. China has been a global leader in providing protective equipment to countries around the world, to developing a vaccine, to communicating with the world about findings of the COVID-19 pandemic and just how harmful it can be. So the work that I do here in the United States is to try to organize those who already have knowledge about China, who already are willing to challenge U.S. provocations, willing to challenge U.S. foreign policy, willing to speak up against injustice as a whole, trying to organize folks like that, people like that, to come together around a common agenda of stopping a new Cold War against China, which we feel, at least I feel, and some of my closest comrades here feel, is the most critical issue that we face, especially in the realm of U.S. foreign policy. The next part of this question, I was asked that America is seriously torn apart in many respects, and I agree with that. To heal the rift, what kind of specific transformations do you think Americans should go through? Are these mind transformations still attainable in U.S. society? In my opinion, I think that this question is very good because it really does focus on consciousness. I think consciousness needs to be raised here in the United States about the truth of China. But really, for me, China tends to be scapegoated here in the United States for the problems that the U.S. is experiencing. Poverty. China is seen as the factory of the world. So that means that China is to blame for the fact that manufacturing jobs and well-paying jobs are fewer and far between here. China is blamed for technological backwardness here in the United States. The United States is falling behind in things like 5G technology, but that's China's fault for not trading fairly, not negotiating fairly, and supposedly spying on people in the United States and tech firms in the United States. It's the pot calling the kettle black, really, meaning that the United States has erected and spent so much money on surveillance, on the infrastructure of the military, but has neglected the needs of the people. And so that, I think, is where we can start to build consciousness, because the US right now is fomenting a dangerous Cold War with China. It is sending military hardware to the South China Sea at a pace that I think is often underestimated here, with the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command seemingly growing every year with new anti-aircraft naval carriers, with more provocations. There was a report that just said that in a month, in September, I believe it was, there were 60 civilian planes that were disguised as spy planes flying in Chinese territory, and that is just very dangerous. I think that the mind transformations, the consciousness that needs to be raised in the United States really does center on placing China in this anti-China attack that large sections of the U.S. establishment are focusing on, centering that within the broader movement for social justice, centering it within the broader movement for peace, the broader movement for ecological preservation and environmental protection. I think all of the issues that face humanity as a whole, that humanity really has a lot of stake in, because of all of the anti-China slander, the effect it's had is to immediately cause a reaction. When you mention China, people immediately think of authoritarianism, dictatorship, of Xinjiang, of repression, of Hong Kong. All of these hot point issues that the US media, the US political establishment have used to demonize China. If we can talk about the environment, if we can talk about poverty, if we can talk about peace, China has declared itself willing to become a carbon neutral country by 2060. That China is on its way to becoming free of extreme poverty by 2020, and then has dedicated itself to tackling relative poverty and to raising the standard of living of all people within the country. China is really spearheading an international movement towards multipolarity, the idea that multiple powers in the world should have equal say over how the world is governed, forwarding projects like the Belt and Road Initiative, which is about development, it's about infrastructure development, it's about human progress, economic progress, technological progress. It's not about war. It's not about building military bases. It's not about dropping drones in the thousands. It's not about spending billions, hundreds of billions of dollars on mass destruction, on overthrowing other countries, on leveling sanctions on nations like Syria, Venezuela, Iran. It's actually about building connections, literally building bridges to the world. If we can successfully communicate, and that's what I'm going to try to do from here on out, successfully communicate why China actually stands on the right side of these issues, and that while no country is free of problems, no social system is free of problems, if we can understand that China is on the right side of these issues, then we can also understand why it's important for China to be able to determine its own destiny free of US interference, Western interference, interference from anybody, but especially those that seemingly have been drumming up this dangerous escalation and tensions on all fronts of society, from the military, economics, and politics. And I think anti-China sentiment in this country will be reduced. And I think the US is really at a turning point in its history. It's really a decision now between whether the US goes toward a path of barbarism, toward a path of self-destruction with economic misery, racism, and war, or whether people in the United States, especially ordinary people, choose to build a world and become agents in building a world of peace and prosperity for all, of a world where the environment is really worth living in and able to be lived in. So I hope that answers your question, and I really do appreciate all of the work that you all are doing in your homeland to build a world that is better and more just. And so I salute all of you netizens, all of you fans of Peace Bro and Peace Sis, and I hope to be in communication with you again very soon.